But to talk more about this, to show you Amenity, and to talk about our first integration, I'm gonna bring up Nate Storch. Nate is the founder and former CEO of Amenity, and he's gonna introduce you to this, and we're gonna talk a little more from there. Nate, welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. I want to start off by thanking Ben and Brad for bringing Amenity on board. And I want to thank all of you, first, for showing up today. What a great turnout. And for embracing Amenity into the Symphony community with so much excitement and enthusiasm. A quick note on our background. I started my career in capital markets. I spent my entire career in the financial markets. I started as an investment banker, and then as a hedge fund analyst and portfolio manager. And about 8 years ago, I started Amenity Analytics. And it's our mission to build an NLP platform for capital markets. Every day, we analyze millions of pages, regulatory filings, news, broker research, earnings call transcripts, and we transform that into data sets for automation and insights. We have 4 major product lines: ESG data, sentiment data, voice of customer, and research tagging. And we have a great booth in the back, so I'd really encourage everybody to spend some time there and take a look at some of the things that we're doing. As Brad and Mike mentioned, it's an exciting time in the world of AI, and Symphony has a major role in the future of AI for capital markets. We're incredibly excited to be here.
Awesome. Now, Nate, I talked a little bit about why Amenity and Symphony made sense for us, but tell the audience a little bit about why Symphony made sense for Amenity and how you're excited about our future.
Well, when you think about what Symphony brings to the table, secure and compliant infrastructure, over 500,000 verified users, and now you add Amenity's world-class NLP and AI, it's an extraordinarily compelling combination. And we're incredibly excited about what we can build for you. We want to be your trusted partner in building AI workflows for all of your stakeholders.
Very cool. So, what are people going to see?
Well, today we're going to give you an overview of some of the things that Amenity does today for our customers. Our ESG platform, our taxonomy editor, our document viewer, and then we're going to give you a view into the future of what Amenity and Symphony are working on together.
Awesome. Now, as anyone who's been to Symphony Innovate before knows, we do our demos live. If this is your first time to Symphony Innovate, welcome. We do our demos live. We acknowledge and accept the risk that comes with that. We kind of like the risk a little, maybe too much, but this is Nate's time, so we're gonna wish him luck. And Nate, let's go.
Thanks, Mike. Let's dive in. What you see here behind me is the Amenity ESG dashboard. And this is designed to deliver to our customers the ESG insights they need in real time on the companies and industries they care about. So as we dive in, let's take a company, BMW as an example, and we're able to see the insights that Amenity delivers. First is a sentiment chart, where we're able to see how BMW sentiment from an ESG perspective has evolved over time. And you're able to do that versus its industry. You're able to see the topics and trends that have composed that sentiment score in our trending topics score. You're able to drill down even further into materiality. So what are the commitments, investments, milestones, goals that BMW has made over the past year, 2 years, that might influence where they're going from an ESG perspective? And finally, one of my favorites, which is our greenwashing. So where a company might be getting ahead of themselves and are getting called out by independent stakeholders into their ESG policy. And this has been a great early warning system for impending crises. And what's cool about this is that it's all backed by verifiable information. So if you look at our detailed data, you can go right back to the source documents and find exactly what you're looking for. Now, underneath this is a powerful set of tools that let you personalize this data so it can capture exactly what you want. So what you see now is our taxonomy editor. And we've put our ESG model here into the taxonomy editor, and you're able to use this tool to capture exactly the information that you want to extract from the texts. So you see here the E, the S, and the G. You're able to dive down into each at a very granular level of detail, multiple nodes, and see exactly what is being classified. And you're able to personalize it. So you can change nodes, you can rename them, you can modify them, you can move them around, all at your fingertips. And this is an enterprise-grade tool. So it's designed to sit on multiple desktops, and it has full accountability, it has full approval process and auditing. Now, once you've built a model, you're able to take that model and apply it to a document in real time. So what you see here is our document editor, and you're able to now add a document to that editor and apply the tags from your model. And so in real time, you simply call an API, and voila, you've got the tags that you created in the taxonomy editor applied to your document. And now this is really helpful in terms of developing that trust to understand how the AI impacts your documents. And we actually have a number of research providers who use this in real time as they're authoring to understand how their work is getting tagged.
Awesome, super powerful, Nate. Now, one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the last few months has been getting to meet your customers and you getting to meet our customers and having brainstorms both with them and internally around how can we extend Amenity into Symphony? How can we connect these products? And I think just the collaboration that we've seen now and with the broader AI landscape, just the conversations engagement have been unique, I'd say is probably my best word. But I think people really want to see, they see Amenity, I think hopefully they get it now. How are we going to bring these things together?
Well, Mike, you and Brad touched on it. We're certainly at the peak of the hype cycle when it comes to AI. And to tell the truth, I think it's justified. The changes that we're going to see in how we work are profound. And while it's exciting, it's also daunting. But on the exciting side, one of the things that I've seen that I've really been focused on is that the relationship between humans and data is on the cusp of a whole new world. Now, if you take Amenity's dashboard, it's filled with data, intricate, accurate, very useful data. But it's data that's best used by a data analyst who can take it, turn it into stories, and those stories can then reach hundreds, thousands of people. But that takes that data analyst. Well, imagine if you had your own personal data analyst who could take millions of data points and form it into stories, who was a terrific writer, who never got tired, who never complained, who never told you were asking stupid questions, who was never hungover. And imagine if that data analyst lived inside Symphony. Let's take a look. What you see here is a Symphony chat room where that ESG bot, the Amenity ESG bot, now lives. And we've trained this bot on Amenity ESG data, so it can serve that role as data analyst. And let's take BMW again. And you're able to enter in a question. What's happened most recently on BMW? And you're able to enter that question into your bot, and you're able to see how you can get an answer. Now think of some stakeholders that you might have at your banks, whether it's a banker or an analyst or a wealth manager who has an important meeting with a corporate client or an important investment manager that they're talking to, and they need to know what's important from an ESG perspective on BMW. Well, they've got their primer right here. They can go in confident that they know what's happened most recently on BMW. And now let's say you loved what you just read and you want to turn it into a slide. You're able to engage with that bot again and transform this into a set of bullet points. And you see here, immediately you have those bullet points, the positive, the negative, and you can simply cut and paste those out into your slides and you're ready to go. So again, a meaningful use of AI to accelerate an important workflow that we know exists.
No, I think it's super powerful. Now, we've all been playing personal or professional with various interactive interfaces, and what's the benefit or what's the value proposition between this approach versus using a more generic foundational model, for example?
Well, one of the major hurdles in AI for capital markets is how do you trust the data? How do you know that it's not hallucinating? Can you validate the sources? And we've address those problems by sourcing our model, training our model on amenity data. So it's already validated, it's already been confirmed, and you're able to source it. So you can see here footnotes that show you the exact sources where our bot found the answers that it's providing. So if you want to verify, it's right there, you have that opportunity.
Awesome. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned, 3 strategic themes. Making Symphony the AI marketplace, the trusted AI marketplace for you to expose your data to your employees and your customers. AI-powered workflows in Symphony and Cloud9. You're gonna see those first 2 later in the day in the various demos throughout. And then, of course, amenity content and workflow injected into Symphony. This is where we've started. There's more to come across all of these. Most importantly, we want to be your partner as you all go through your AI journey and the workflows that create. Symphony is here to help. Symphony is here to connect. I think it's exciting times ahead for us.
We couldn't be more thrilled to be here.
Awesome. But as always, we can talk all we want, but it's most important to hear from our customers. So who are we gonna bring up, Nate?
Well, today we have Brian Herlihy. Brian is the co-founder of 22V Research and part of their top-ranked research team on macro and quant. He's been an Amenity customer for quite a while now, so we're excited to welcome him to Symphony Innovate.
Good to meet you.
All right. One, I think the chatbot is awesome. So we can definitely talk about that more.
Thanks. Well, Brian, like I mentioned, you've been an Amenity customer now for quite a while. Can you talk about how you use sentiment data and the role that it plays in your process? Maybe touch on a few of your highlights from over the past several years?
Certainly. So we write research for for institutional investors, which means that we have to, not just purely quants, so we have to convert all of our ideas into easily accessible information. So one of the things that we did, and one of the powers of the model, is we attach it to topical events. So when COVID hit, there was a lot of questions about, well, how are we going to track this information? How are we going to know how much of a hit or when we should start to fade COVID or when we start to really worry about it? One of the components that we added very quickly using Amenity was COVID news sentiment. Simply tracking news flows and whether or not, whether it's growing more or less positive or negative on COVID. Importantly, very quickly it was identified that hospitalizations were the real kind of key here. And then we were able to track sentiment towards hospitalization data. I want to point out, because I'm going to come back to it later on, the collapse in sentiment towards the end and why it's important, even with the AI bots, to know what questions to ask. Another component, another way we're able to use this flexibly is supply chain sentiment. When the aftermath of COVID, we had significant supply chain problems. The data wasn't really there. People hadn't tracked it because it hadn't been a significant issue. What we were able to do was go through and measure supply chain sentiment historically within companies. So these are all from earnings call transcripts, the top section is. And we are looking at the orange line rather. That was sentiment within companies, and then we're comparing that to news sentiment. One of the components that we use is frequently to track just how over the skis news is getting. And it's often looking for disconnects, right? Is fundamental data confirming what we're seeing in the news, or is it not? Another piece of this that feeds directly from the supply chains, it was the next in the line, inflation. So we started to look at daily news sentiment, but also intensity. And that's the point about the hospitalizations data. The intensity had collapsed. The only people who were still writing articles were writing negative articles, but there weren't that many articles being written. Same thing with inflation sentiment. It wound up very negative, but only after the intensity of those, the focus on sentiment started to fade. So this is one of the flexible ways to use this data and to backfill for questions that you hadn't been asking historically.
So, Brian, you've been right on top of the markets, and it's been an invaluable guide for me in looking at markets. It's been an invaluable guide, I know, for your customers. So let's fast forward to today. Can you walk the audience through what you're seeing out in the world, how you're thinking about markets? And if you touch on Amenity data, I won't complain.
Fair enough. So as I said, we really focus on earnings call transcripts. We also do a lot of work with news flow. This is a chart of earnings factor sentiment within the S&P 500. I have a little theme that I like to play with in terms of factor analysis. Factor analysis went from being interesting to being necessary to being absolutely necessary but not actually generating a lot of returns. Right, factor analysis is still functionally useful, but it basically went from being an alpha generator to being a risk factor. Earnings sentiment and general sentiment scores we think of as still being alpha factors. These are things that are outside of the normal scope of what analysts are looking at. It's picking up on changes in tonic levels of sentiment within companies. Earnings were surprisingly strong this last season, and earnings sentiment turned higher 2 quarters ago. It was already telling you that this was going to start happening. We just knew it in advance. This is breaking it down. One of the uses of it, we can look at it across sectors, how it's changing. This is quarter-over-quarter changes. We can also look at it at the factor level. I think this is very important. People look at factors and say, okay, well, I want to own value, I want to own growth. The question is, how is that factor evolving over time? This allows us to track sentiment within factors and then to further isolate. I want to have quality names, but that don't have deeply negative earnings sentiment. And then we're going to get into the final piece, and I'll run through this fairly quickly. The polarity and the intensity of mentions. One thing that came out of this earnings season, earnings were better. They weren't better because people were getting positive. They just got less negative. They were taking out the left tail risk, right? The risk that we're going to collapse has fallen. We also looked at cost sentiment. It's one of the measures, one of the understandings or way that we understand whether or not inflation expectations are accurate and whether or not it's helping with profitability. It has been decreasing. That helped us understand that earnings were going to beat. Margin commentary, that's forward-looking ideas versus trailing. That also trending higher, broken down by sectors. And this is the real big point for this period. Financing sentiment at the S&P level, liquidity sentiment at the S&P level. It got worse. It didn't collapse. 3 months ago, everybody told us the banking failures were the beginning of an immediate deterioration in credit. Even within the financials, yes, it's all gotten lower. It's just still very strong. And the same thing for liquidity sentiment within financials. The one place where it is deeply negative and concerning is workforce sentiment. That whole last tick down is all tech. So something to keep in mind.
You know, what I love about this is that we live in a world where narratives get put forth through the press, and it's so hard to cut through the noise to actually find the meat, what really matters. And here you're able to go into earnings calls and extract out specifically what you need, whether it's around liquidity, whether it's around margins, whether it's around workforce, and really understand, again, at that granular level, 10,000 earnings calls per quarter are going into this data. So you're really able to develop those deep insights and provide a very insightful view into what's going on in the markets.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Nate.
You're welcome.
It was amazing. We're very excited. We have a bright future ahead, and we're going to bring on our next session, which is all about community, as we talk about the Symphony Challenge powered by OpenFed.